listening to Wake Up Hollywood with Nikki Korula and Eddie Pence, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Wake up, Hollywood. This is your host of the most, Nikki Korula. We're going to jump right into this episode. Happy New Year, everybody. We have a very talented writer and director joining us today, Mr. Mayank Deogankar. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Deogankar.
Deogankar. How does it become a W in there? I see an N.
Yeah, it's the N is kind of like silent, I guess.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sneaks
That's cool.
in. I don't know.
So it's Deogankar?
Deogankar, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. I love that. So first, where's your family from? I know you're an Indian like me, but what part of India is your family from?
Yeah, we're originally from Maharashtra, so we're Marathi. Family is mostly based in Nagpur, India. But yeah, I grew up all around, so I don't really consider myself like from one part of India or even from one part of the world. You know, like we moved around so much that I'm just like, I'm here.
Yeah, I saw that you grew up in the UK for a little bit. Like, how old were you when you lived there?
We moved there twice actually, so we had two stints in the UK, both for like a couple of years here and there. So I was quite young, like I don't remember much of it, like probably around 8, 9, 10, 12, like that. So I was quite young. It was the US is basically where I've grown up from, let's say 7th grade onwards has been the US.
So you're a coconut like me, man.
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Do you speak Hindi or Tamil or any of those languages?
So I speak Hindi. Yeah, I'm like multilingual, like most of us immigrants are. English is kind of my main language, but you know, I speak Hindi. I also speak Marathi a little bit.
Wow.
And yeah, you got to be a polyglot, right? From where we come. So
that's right. You know, my brother and I tease my parents because they only used to speak Hindi to each other or Malayalam, where my family's from, just when they wanted us to not know what they were talking about. So they never actually infiltrated the language into either of our lives in that way. So we always kind of, we tease them about that. But that's awesome. That can't be easy to learn all those languages and then live in so many different cultures. Tell me what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in India, so like learning in the sense like that was my mother tongue, right? So Hindi in our house, even though our family is Maharashtrian, we spoke Hindi mostly. So like that's kind of I grew up on Hindi, and then we moved to the UK, and then of course English, and that is like proper English if you want to call it. So that was a very different thing. Then I only had that accent as a kid, a British, very, if you can imagine, like a very British accent. And then we moved around again, then to the US, and even in the US it was like we lived in Arizona as well. So it's like I had like a weird morph. My accent morphed so much that now it's just this, which it shifts. When I go to India, I have a slightly thicker Indian accent. When I'm here, it just automatically shifts. But yeah, I will say as a kid growing up, it was definitely annoying. We'd move a lot. You'd make friends and you'd be like, oh, okay, now we're moving. But I would say, yeah. And I would say in hindsight though, like it was very I don't know how to word it properly, but very much so that it made me more, I feel, inclusive in the sense that I I was around so many different types of folks that it just became like I never looked at the other as the other. Like I'm like, oh, this is just a new person I can engage with and interact with.
Well, that's
So,
also intimidating too as a kid to go to so many new schools and new countries.
mhm.
Like, a lot of people don't realize when you went to the UK, you were probably in boarding school because that's kind of like what the normal is. Did you go to a boarding school and kind of like there was a little bit of a transition when you did that?
Yeah, it wasn't really a I don't know, it wasn't really a boarding school per se, but it was definitely a very different experience. It was what we would say in the US is a private school, but in the UK they call it a public school. It's basically like a bit formal, wearing uniforms, like, it was very much a strict kind of environment. So that was a very different experience. And then coming to the US, I went to a US public school, which is not the same as a UK public school. US public school is very just I guess you would compare it to a government school, maybe. I'm not sure what the comparison would be, but it's very much like, people have a dress code, but it's not like there's no uniforms. You wear what you want, and then you know it's a very freeing kind of vibe. And that was the first time I went to an American school. It was a very different kind of like culture shock. I was like, the first day I showed up, I remember I wore like what I was used to wearing, which was like, formal shirt, pants. And then I showed up and everybody's like in jeans and t-shirts. And I'm like, what is
What I dress up for this?
yeah, why did I dress up for this? So yeah, it's definitely a culture shock for
And
sure.
what about that? What about the actual schooling? Like, I mean, we have recess here. You probably didn't have that in the same way. You probably had like classes that was like doing, physical activity or like what kind of sports did you kind of do when you were when you were a kid over in the UK?
Yeah, we did a lot of cricket and a lot of soccer or football. And yeah, that's definitely a thing. Cricket was definitely huge. A
Did
lot
you
of
get into
cricket
cricket? Because
camps.
I still don't understand that game 100%.
Well, I mean, growing up in India, you kind of just, you live cricket for a long time. We would play in the streets and we'd get together. We had this colony, so the colony kids would get together in the local like parking lot and we'd play. And like, so I grew up on cricket. When then I came to the UK, there was a lot of football or soccer. And I remember like we lived in Newcastle upon Tyne, which at the time, I don't know how much you know about football. It was Newcastle United was one of the bigger teams, and with like, so we actually had like, I went to a camp where Michael Shearer, who was one of the biggest players at the time, came, and then he taught us for like a couple of weeks. So it
Amazing.
was, yeah, it was. I didn't know at the time. Again, at the time, like I was like, oh, cool, local hero kind of person. But then in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I got to experience like a legend. So yeah,
Yeah, it's like one of those things you think it's a casual thing that you think every neighborhood gets this kind of treatment, but
right,
it's not that way. And also, he was your neighborhood's hero as far as like an athlete, but you didn't think he's like a global sensation because
right,
he's your neighborhood team's player. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So when did you fall in love with film? Like, did you have family nights where you watch movies? Was it your escape from like school and just like hanging out with friends? Like, tell me when you fell in love with movies.
Yeah, I mean, I was always in love with movies, honestly. But I would say like the defining moment is probably one. So we did have movie nights, that's for sure. Me, my mom, and my dad would get together and watch movies. And my dad and me were more into it. My mom was more, she was a professional, but she was also like the homemaker as well. So she would come in and out, like she would be cooking or something and then come in and watch like 15-20 minutes, then go back. And then every time she'd come in, she'd be like, okay, so what's happening?
How it works? You need to sit and watch the whole thing. Right.
Yes, absolutely. But she was always like, she was never, not until later where she was very much into it. But yeah, before it was very much like that. So I remember those nights quite well. But the real kind of moment was me and my father. We were watching for the first time in entirety, a movie called Sholay, which is a very classic Indian but like film, which on its own is genius for so many different reasons when it comes to Bollywood history. But for me, it was very important because so my father was a big fan of Amitabh Bachchan, who is again a legendary actor. Excuse me,
And these
in
are all
India.
these are all Bollywood movies.
Yes,
Just in case our viewers are like,
right,
"What?"
exactly. Yeah,
Right,
they
right,
they are. Yeah, that's what I grew up on. I grew up on Bollywood because I grew up most like started in India, so that's the industry. That's the kind of film that I grew up watching. So we were watching Sholay, and he was a big fan of Amitabh Bachchan, and he would spout the dialogues like word by word, verbatim, and he would know exactly what's going to happen, where the music cues would come in. And I remember when I saw that, it was eye opening because it was the first time I saw my I realized that my father can emote. Like he actually has the ability to smile and laugh and get really enthusiastic about something. And I realized that there's something about this thing that we're experiencing, this film, this thing that's on the screen that's connected with him.
right.
Maybe it was the memory of the first time watching it because Sholay is a classic. He watched it like when it came out, and I was watching it with him on TV. So maybe that's that. Maybe there's something about celluloids, like just the fantasy of an adventure. So I was like, there's some magic here that's happening that I I need to investigate because I don't know what it is.
Well, it sounds
Um,
like it was like bridging the gap between
yeah,
the generations of the generation between your father and yourself, and you found this common ground, which is like, wow, I like this, and he likes it too, and it opens all these doors. You know what I mean? Just in communication, just because you can share in something that's not academic, not like family related in the sense that you're like hanging out with a bunch of relatives outside of family, where it like
right.
feels like work sometimes, but you're just enjoying the presence of the film and your father. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
bonding. So that must have been a pretty magical moment, just to discover that.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it was something again that made me realize that film has a power that I mean visual medium in general, art, I would go even just broader, art has a power to penetrate through the conscious of anybody, and
But
it
I
has a power to
have a point. You have a point
unite.
because film is like the most powerful medium, I think, of all.
Yeah.
It incorporates music, it incorporates art, it incorporates dance or movement or rhythm on that level.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, it is a cinematic moment because it's all done, bringing it to your screen, whatever screen that is. And these days, that screen can be a cell phone, it can be a computer
Right.
screen, it can be a TV screen, but it's still a way that you capture the medium and present it, and that it has something that takes a very involved amount of methods to create it in its entirety,
Hmm.
between the filming, the editing, sound, actors, all of it. I think it is the
Yeah.
ultimate medium for sure.
Yeah, no, I would say like art in general is very powerful, but you're right. Film is one of those things that brings all elements of art,
Yeah.
visual, auditory, writing, literary, like everything put together. That they call it, I guess, moving picture. So right, like so it's everything, it's every element put together to give you hopefully a very enjoyable, entertaining experience. And it's the only place that, a lot of the times nowadays we're seeing a lot of films like via social media or some way that are kind of being used as tools to divide, like, hey, like, being very political or something. But I think film as a medium is probably one of the bigger unifiers.
Yep.
Because you'll have, again, I'll go into my comfort zone of Bollywood because that's where I live mostly.
Right.
um But you have like, let's take a big star like Shah Rukh Khan, who is global star. He's got fans from Japan to Hawaii. Like he's got fans everywhere.
Right.
You've got somebody from Europe and Germany that likes the same movies as a a middle class person in Mumbai. You
Yep.
know, like
There's a bunch
it's
of Iranians
he's
that love Bollywood films. Huge.
exactly.
It's huge in Iran. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when I learned how big like the market is for Bollywood films, it kind of astounded me because it's like you don't think when you're from there. Like the funny thing about me is like I grew up being fascinated with Western culture, so like
Hmm.
Western music, Western films, and I know very little about Bollywood films, and it's a part of my culture, but I know very little about it. So it's so interesting that that was your first experience into loving film and how your father loved it too. And so there must have been like a lot of musical elements that your father loved as far as music in film as well, because that's what Bollywood, when I think of Bollywood films, I always think of like they're like Indian musicals, you know? So there's
Yeah.
music and theater in so much of in the way that it's presented, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, it's things that I learned over the years, and that was the first step into it, where, he resonates with classic Bollywood and classic music a bit more than nowadays. So, like, and if you think of like classic Bollywood, there's a lot of elements of old school, rock and old school coming in. You look at R.D. Burman, or even as like, those, they kind of took the Western elements of like jazz and rock, and brought them into rock and roll, and brought them into Indian kind of musical subconscious. So yeah, he's a big fan of that kind of music. And there's one thing, I think he mentioned, or someone I know mentioned, where there's a differentiation of, like, back in the day, Bollywood music used to be melodious and thoughtful, where now it's just solely focused on beat.
Wow.
And that rings true. Like, you listen to songs nowadays, maybe even outside of Bollywood, I would say a
Yeah, I
lot
was
of songs
gonna say
nowadays
very much
focus
for
on
Western
beat
too. Yep.
versus melody.
Yep.
So yeah, that's so he's more of the melodious generation
And
versus.
what's really interesting about what you said earlier, I wanted to talk about that. You said, film and art in general are unifiers. My mom, I had this really cool conversation with my mom once, and she said she really believes the artists will be the people that actually unite the world. And I'm like,
Mm,
you're absolutely correct. And I kind of feel like sometimes sports can do that too, but really it can also divide us because you're so into a certain sports team or a sport. But
mm,
like when it comes to art, it really does bring a lot of people together from so many diverse backgrounds, and it's not something that is geographically destined. It's like
right.
you can be into music you've never heard of from another country, and it just draws you in because of the elements that make up that song or that film or the way it looks, or a certain dance or a certain writing. And that's what makes it so beautiful. It's like it can respond within all of us because it documents the human condition, and it
Hmm.
also kind of like helps us to congregate and kind of like acknowledge our differences, but in a united way, which does not happen anymore. You know what I mean? You don't see
True.
that. There's so much, that's going on. Now, did you fall in love with Western film as well, or did that take a lot longer because you were just more into Bollywood?
Um, no, I did. Yeah, I did definitely. So what happened was, when I kind of put my interest of film out there, and to my family, saying, "Hey, I want to do this. I'm really interested in this." I remember, this is kind of the very Indian nature of Indian parents, where it's like, um, my mom was like super supportive, but she's like, "If you're gonna do this properly." So she's like, "Here's a few courses, like summer courses. Go take these, and then figure out what all this stuff is about, because you look from the outside, hey, film, glamour, glitz, awesomeness, but what does it take to make a movie, right? What does it take? So learn it. So I remember going to my first summer course in Manhattan at the New York Film Academy. And it was a summer course. I was still in high school, and we that was when I kind of really delved into Western cinema. Like I knew about it, of course. I knew about Star Wars, and I knew about, like, I would watch shows, we would watch TV shows a lot, NCIS and Law and Order, and like, again, all of this stuff is there, but the art of learning film and how it works. That was at that course where we delved into the classic, the legends, Akira Kurosawa, and then you go into like later on like Scorsese, and that's when I really started delving into like legendary filmmakers and actually really watching their films as a way to understand how film is made.
Right.
Um, and now I would just say, like, in general, like, I am just a film lover at this point. Like, I'll watch
I'm the same.
anything and everything,
Yes.
from anywhere, global.
Yeah.
So,
I'm learning that some of the best stories are international stories. So
mhm,
I've gotten into. What I notice about myself is I get really into a certain genre of film. So like
mm,
I will get into documentaries like big time. And
mhm,
then I will totally abandon documentaries for the moment and get way into international film. And I
mm,
just fall in love with international stories and just great movies, like cinematic, like accomplishments. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Then I come back and I go through a classics phase, and I'm
mm,
like way into old film to understand like this is why this is brilliant. So like like I hadn't seen the Godfather trilogy, so I watched that about 5
mm.
years ago, and I watched them all, and I was like, how have I never seen the Godfather? This is crazy. And so like now I'm kind of like I try to kind of dabble in each of them and just do like two movies and then move on to the next. But there was a time where I was just like so into the art form by genre that I would spend like a month or two and just
Mm.
watch as many films in that genre as possible. But man, honestly, what I love about film is it encapsulates the human condition in such a beautiful way, but it
Mhm.
also challenges you to learn about another way of living, another kind of part of the world, another decade of living, another era, or
Right.
generation of musicians or artists or whatever it is. And it kind of tells you this story in a way that is, you're able to access something like this in 2 hours, which is crazy. Like if you think about it, a documentary or even a Bollywood movie, you're sitting there, and this is what I love about movies. You're getting these stories thrown to you in
Mm.
2 hours, and by the end of it, you've seen something that challenges your beliefs. You've learned something about something you never knew. You laughed about something you never thought would be so funny. And these kind of like movies are the things that document your life. Like when you remember
Yeah.
when you saw E.T. or you brought up Star Wars, perfect example. I remember
Mhm.
when like when you were talking about how you fell in love with movies. For me, it was Star Wars. When I first saw Star Wars as a kid, I was like, "There's nothing greater than seeing." I still remember the feeling of seeing Return of the Jedi
Oh,
in the
wow.
and like that was a monumental experience. That's what made me fall in love with movies. And I love that you still love movies like that. Do you still go out and see movies?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge theater person. I've got the, I don't know if we can do brand names, but I've got that
Yeah,
specific like subscription, the monthly, like I pay monthly fees and I go like watch 3 4 movies a month. Like
awesome.
that's
Well,
what
if
I
you ever
do.
need somebody to go see a movie with, I'm always looking to go see movies. I love movies, man.
Yeah, of course. I'm because that's, I feel like, of course, recent events kind of made us all little hermits, and
Right.
we were watching stuff on smaller screens, and I know some people that watch whole movies on their phones, like 2 hour movies on their phones, and if that works for you, great. You're an audience member. I respect it, but film is meant to be a collective experience.
Right.
It's there's a reason somebody put in time, effort, bunch of money in order to create something and then more money to put it out on a big screen theater. And still, there are people that are like, oh, I'd rather watch it at home. And that's fine. Again, from an audience's perspective, I get it. It's comfortable. You're at home and you can go on your own pace. You can pause the film if you want to take a break. But I feel like films are a collective experience, and
Absolutely.
anybody who says otherwise, like theaters are going to go away, they aren't going away. I say we might move to a technological advancement where the collective experience of it might change, but
Right.
the idea of the collective experience, I don't think that's going to go away. It's
No,
films
there's
are,
nothing
yeah.
more exciting when you see a movie with a packed movie house and
Mm-mm.
everybody's reacting to the same things at the same time, clapping, laughing. I
Yeah.
mean, like, or if something scares people. I mean, it's intense to have a group experience like that. And I think that's what makes movie houses so iconic for me. I
Hmm.
always love going to see movies in a theater because of that experience. Even if it's like six people in the theater, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, all of a sudden now you're watching something and experiencing something together. So tell me how this shaped you as a filmmaker, because now you've gone through school, you've taken these classes. Did you go to film school after high school?
Not right away. I got my got my bachelor's in political science, and sociology, and then I did a stint in law school, and then I realized that this was just pushing the inevitable, and ended up coming out to LA for pursuing my master's, and then that was film school. Like that was my true film school. And then just yeah, I've been doing that since
Where
then.
did you do your master's?
Sorry.
Where did you do your master's for film?
New York Film Academy
Oh,
here.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So they put you in the environment. And what was the biggest thing that you learned when you were in school? Like, you're obviously this is what I learned going to music school. It's like all of a sudden you're in the company of artists and people that
Mhm.
love what you love. And it's like, man, some of my favorite times in music school weren't the classes, it was the hangs with people talking about movies or films or things that inspired them, and learning about musicians or movies or poetry or paintings that you were just like, I've never heard of this. And they're like, oh my God, let me show you this stuff. Like, what was film school like for you coming into this culture and kind of like adapting to this new world?
Yeah, I would say it was a very similar experience. You're around um, a group of artists, basically, and everybody comes from different backgrounds, but and they might have different perspectives
Right.
on how to shoot something or what films are good and what films are bad. But at the end of the day, the pursuit is the same, and that is to tell stories. So you're among storytellers. So yeah, it was definitely a very uh, very nice to be around folks that understood that we're all here for the same purpose. We're all here to pursue that same, to learn more about the art of storytelling. That's why we're here. So, and it was definitely, we had a film history class, and that was one of my favorites. I love practical stuff, and I love doing things on set, but I really enjoy delving into the history of stuff,
Right.
and cinema. A lot of the things that we learned, I remember I had never seen. Speaking of, like you said, you'd never seen Godfather. I had never seen Casablanca until film school.
I still haven't seen it. I still haven't seen it.
And same with Citizen Kane. Like I'd never seen those until film school, and I remember watching Casablanca, the black and white version, and same with Citizen Kane, and just completely be engrossed, especially with Casablanca, just be engrossed with everything, and it was um, such a wonderful story. And if you haven't seen it, you should. Even the listeners, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely see it. It's a classic for a reason. It's
It takes place in Morocco, doesn't it? Doesn't it take place in?
Yeah, it takes place there. It takes place in a particular time period. It also the a little interesting tidbit of history. It was shot in a time where Hollywood was going through a very kind of sensory era called the Hays. There was a Hays Code involved. So basically, it was where you couldn't show certain things on film, and that was one of the last films to be part of that. So there's a very particular. It's a bit of a spoiler. I don't know if you care, but
I've seen it. Go ahead.
at kind of the base story is like uh basically they come to this character Rick's cafe, and there's a past love affair that this woman has with him, but she's married at this point. I believe it's married or engaged at this point, and the whole story takes like about their past love affair. Is she, will they, won't they? And then at the end of it, she sticks with the husband, and that's seen as one of the, again, finer storytelling things. But one thing that most people don't know is because it was part of the Hays Code, as a writer during that time, you couldn't show adultery. So like it wasn't really a choice for her character if she was already married, for her to, they talk about sacrifice of Casablanca and her character. Like he sacrificed his love for the war effort, basically. And the thing is, he didn't have a choice as a character, because like if Casablanca was made a few years later, who knows? It could have ended differently, and it wouldn't have maybe been the same film, and it probably maybe would not have been a classic. So.
Right.
It's like I love when all of those things, when you look at all of that stuff and you say that this is why it had to happen at that moment, and it's a classic because it was made like that. So
I love that. I love that. And you recently made an awesome short. I actually just watched it, called Butterscotch, and you've been winning
yes.
some awards for it. And I got to tell you, I didn't know what it was going to be about, and it really hit home because it's about a kid living in a South Asian household and
Mhm.
getting the pressure to do academics, and she wants to be an artist. And it really hit home for me because that's been my life. It's like, I came from a very academic family, and I still come from a very academic family, and I wanted to be an artist, and I know what that pursuit is like, and it's not easy, especially for Southeast Asian families or artists, on both
Mhm.
sides, because it's like when you have a passion, you don't want it to be predestined. You don't want your life to be.
Right.
That's not what life's about. It's about the unexpected. It's about the unknown. So I love that you make this film about that. Let's check out the trailer real quick, and then we'll talk about the movie. Here's
Sure.
the trailer for Butterscotch. Yeah, man, that's gonna be
Damn.
cool. How did you figure out how to make the trailer? Because I know that's such a specific thing, and also it's very hard because your film is 15 minutes long, and it's like
Yeah.
you have a couple seconds to like tell the story. How did you figure out what scenes to use?
Yeah, no, putting a trailer together is difficult at the best of times. And the thing is, yeah, we only have about 15 minutes of footage, so doing like a 1 minute trailer for a 15 minute, like it doesn't make sense because so I was like, it has to be like 30 seconds. It can't really go more. And there was a choice to be made whether we put any dialogue in it or not. And I really, as a viewer, I love watching vague trailers, like
Right.
trailers that maybe touch you emotionally, but they don't like they don't tell you much, like what the movie's about, or that way you're like, oh, I wonder what the film's about, let me watch this. um so yeah, that's why we chose no dialogues, and we chose like not to um focus too much on giving much of the story away. So what you see in the trailer is these two characters, something happens, there's a paper, so you're like, something happens between them, and then they're put on two opposites. And it's also not the whole story, because as you've seen the film, that's not where we finish, so it's kind of like I'm giving you, like, hey, this, I'm giving you a bit, so maybe you can watch it and see what happens
Well, what's
next.
also interesting too, like having seen the film, like you took very dramatic parts. You're like, I'm gonna give you some juicy dramatic parts in the trailer.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that you did that because it makes it like, oh my god, this is intense. But it's really like a really simple story and
Yeah.
something I know every Asian artist can relate to because it's like academics are very important in the Southeast Asian community. It's like
Hmm.
people don't really understand how much that is an emphasis on how you should guide your life and career with
Hmm.
academics. That's like a staple. And you're creating a story where I think a lot of artists can relate to this, where it's like, yo, I'm going to do all this, but when it comes time for me to choose my life, I'm going to choose what I want to do. And that alone is a very like revolutionary concept, especially because in Southeast Asian cultures, most of the time the parents kind of they influence what the kid should do as a career so
Right.
that they can tell their friends about what their kid's doing as a career,
Yeah.
whether or not it makes them happy. So tell me what was the inspiration behind this for you as an artist?
Well, that was a lot of it that you just said, like a lot of that, where you know it I've seen, I won't say, I will admit, I probably didn't face as much resistance, as I kind of mentioned before. Actually, my father and mother were both artists in their own rights. My father is like, he's a poet. He loves to write, and my mother was a musician, a Indian classical musician. So she played the sitar.
Wow,
So yeah, and I would accompany her on tabla back in the day. So
awesome!
it's
We'll have to jam sometime because I'm terrible with tablas.
I haven't played in years, honestly, so I don't know how good I am anymore. But so, like, the arts were always encouraged. And when I told my mom, hey, I want to be a filmmaker. Like, I'm interested in films, and the next day she's like, here's like 10 programs, you should check this out. So they've always encouraged me. That was always there. But I there's also that kind of thing in the back of the mind that you don't go into it blind. You have a backup. That's the more traditional elements of Indian parenting coming in. Like, you should have a backup. You should have some solid contingencies if this doesn't work out, kind of deal. So I did face a version of that, not exactly what the daughter faces in Butterscotch, but kind of similar. So I wrote the story out of just wanting to talk about it, and maybe providing a different perspective also from the parent side, which I think there's a lot of stories about artist children that don't necessarily get their way, but I think we don't really see much stories where we find out why their parents behave the way they do,
Right.
and why they want what they would consider a better path, better career path, better path in life. And of course, in a short, you don't have much time to delve too deep into many things. But I hope a little bit of, like, the reasoning behind the mother's choices on why she is a little bit controlling. It comes out. I hope that comes out a little bit.
Yeah.
And uh, another thing I wanted to encourage is, um, kind of this idea of communication, because parents and children, especially those on two different sides of an issue, don't always communicate,
Right.
and they put up a wall. And this happened many times. And I think that this story, I wanted to show that one side has to be like, hey, we need to talk, we have to talk about this. Um, so yeah, I just want to say, like, you're talking about South Asian parents and South Asian story, but this particular story is a little more broad. It's not just Asian culture, because we've been taking it to festivals, and we were in like Cincinnati, which is our first like world premiere, and there was an audience member who was from kind of rural Ohio who had come to see the festival, and she was a teacher, and she was a white American rural Ohio teacher, and she's like, this movie should be shown to parents, because it's a lot of parents have trouble figuring out why their kids behave the way they do, and it's like, yeah, that's this is why I'm showing this to these people. This is why I created this, so that it can kind of
Open
hope.
the dialogue. Open the dialogue, basically. Well, what's
Exactly.
also really cool too, it's like you show she has the daughter has the ability. You can see it in the first moment. And what's really cool about your movie is how you link the butterscotch ice cream
Yeah.
to the two characters. Because I'll tell you, when I first saw the butterscotch ice cream, I was like, how the hell? Why? What? I was like, how is this going to tie in? Like, this is crazy. And it's endearing how you kind of
Hmm.
like bring it as it's almost like an offering, like how you bridge
Yeah.
the gap between these two characters that are, not seeing eye to eye in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
the cool thing that you do too is you show these characters kind of like reflecting on their own things, their own demons in a
Hmm.
negative way, and the uncertainty of the unknown is definitely presented, but it's also like you do it in a way where you show each character individually separate of the other character, kind of going into the depths of their own like path and figuring
Hmm.
out come how to come to the crossroads and walk through the fire. You know what I mean? So, do you think there was a moment when you were writing this where you felt like you had that moment in your own life where it was like, okay, this is my crossroads. This is what I know what I have to do, because it's so poignant that you're an artist in a South Asian family, and then you wrote
Hmm.
something that is what every South Asian family probably secretly deals with that nobody talks about within the South Asian community.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I think this film is that crossroads. It's when I showed it to my father, showed it to my grandparents, and immediately there was a sense of pride that they had, which, and I'm sure, like, I don't want to I don't want to diss my dad. I'm sure I know he loves me, and I know he is proud of me. But you know how parents can be a bit,
Yeah,
especially fathers, can be a little conservative with their emotions. So it wasn't until he saw the film where he was like, "This is good," and that was the crossroads in my kind of journey, where I created something and I showed it to them, and they're like, "This is actually pretty good."
yeah,
So it's like it wasn't a complete waste in that sense.
right.
So
But it's also
um,
cool that they were supportive.
yeah,
'Cause you could
yeah,
have gone the other way where they're like, "What is this that you're doing?" You know what I mean? You're like, "Oh man, I went through
yeah.
all this work and I spent all this money and time, and now you guys are saying this." You know what I mean? So, and I like that you use the short medium. Like I love short films. It's like I
Yeah.
think it's a very underrated medium, and it tells very effective stories in a concise amount of time for a reason. And that's the beauty of the art form. It's like
Hmm.
I love when shorts give you a beginning, middle, and end, and you're like, oh yeah, this is a fantastic story, and this could have been a feature. You know what I mean? So, do you
Yeah.
do you have like a hope for this to be a feature, or is this just like one part, one facet of a bigger story?
I mean, I didn't make it in the hopes of expanding it. I think it's kind of a glimpse into the life of these characters,
Right.
and we have seen that, and of course, all characters, as a writer as well, like all characters, I'd love to explore and expand, but I think this lives in that time frame. Like that's the story. That's not to say that other aspects of similar life cannot be explored, you know, other aspects of like parent child dynamics, or old generation new generation dynamics, or you know, like NRIs versus people in India dynamics. Like those are all there. You know, there's things worth exploring for sure. But for me, butterscotch lives in those 15 minutes. Like that's where it stays. But yeah, and I do hope that, you know, the more people watch it, and you know, watch it, and I hope they are able to realize that, you know, wherever you come from, whatever path you choose, as long as there's honest and open and sincere communication, um, that you can always get beyond the hurt, and you can always get beyond the differences.
Well,
uh,
there has to be heart in whatever
yeah.
whatever the path, that has to be the reason for taking the path. You know what I mean? It's like if
Yeah.
you don't have heart, then there's no sense of communication. I've got a technical question, a couple
Hmm.
technical questions.
Sure.
So, like, I'm going through a video series right now that I'm kind of directing and producing. Now, what did you shoot it on, and how many cameras did you shoot it on? And the second question is an editing question.
Hmm.
Like, how did you really edited this very beautifully? Like, I really
Thank you.
acknowledge really great editing when I see it, and it's something I'm learning is kind of its own art form, you know, because like
Yeah.
editing really tells a story in a lot of ways and in all the right ways. So first, what did you shoot it on? How many cameras did you shoot it on? And then when it came to the editing process, what was your philosophy and kind of like, you know, form of editing the project?
Yeah, so we shot it on a red, I think it was a Red Dragon, and so our director of photography, Ritik Reddy, he's a genius guy, and he was able to let us have this amazing piece of tech. You know, the Red Dragon is a beautiful, beautiful camera,
Yeah.
and what we ended up doing, it's a single camera setup. It was one camera, and what we ended up doing was he's somebody like me who kind of loves to fuse new tech with old. So we used the red, we reused the red, and then we added old, I believe they're called Leica lenses, like vintage lenses on there. So basically, like you kind of, I don't know if you noticed that there's a bit of a filmy grain to it, like it felt cinematic, and that's the lenses. That's what the lenses are bringing. And that was his idea. He's like, I'd love to shoot this with vintage lenses. So that's what we did. We kind of fused new tech with old tech, and really we had the breadth of, for as an editor, I had all this a big canvas to edit with, like big. We shot in 6K, I want to say, so like big canvas to edit with. But then we also had the texture of film, which I thought was very very cool. Um, and as from the editing perspective, it was it was funny because the script itself is a 9-page script.
Wow.
So I mean, if you know the 1 minute 1 page rule, it's like it should be a 9-minute film.
Yeah.
But when we shot it just ended up being much longer. So
Was that because of
I
the character asides or
yeah,
moments of like
yeah,
of quiet, like within their minds?
exactly.
That took a little bit longer.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, on script, it was like, you know, Maya, who's the mother, like Maya contemplates her daughter's words. And that's the shot in front of the mirror. And also when she's looking through her old things, like that whole thing is like 2 sentences in the script. So, of course, on screen, it's much longer. So, but because of that, the whole sequence where the daughter gets angry and tears everything up. That sequence was originally shot as a one shot. So we shot everything together. But this was something that you're asking about the editing,
Yeah.
where when I was looking at it as a one shot, it felt almost disconnected with the emotions she was feeling to me as an editor. Because yeah, the performance was great, Mehek, and Sri Sora's the mother, Mehek was the daughter. They gave amazing performances, but as I was editing it, and there's a cut where the whole one shot of that we're tearing the whole thing down is there, but I just felt like if I'm that character, I'm disjointed.
Right.
I'm not thinking straight. The rage, the upset, the sadness has taken over. So I was like, it has to be jarring. It can't be like one take shaky. Like it has to be like, oh, she comes in, cut. She goes paces, cut. She sits, thinks, gets that, like all that has to be a bit jarring because that's how she's feeling at the moment.
Right.
um so yeah, those choices had to be made. And speaking of music, there was a big decision of whether we put music in that particular sequence or not. um and there's a cut where there's music in that sequence, but I decided not to go with it.
You feel it
So
because the emotion was in the image.
the emotion was in the image, and whatever score we were putting felt way too much musically to me. And I didn't feel like we could do justice to the performance if we overshadowed it with the music.
Right.
So like, and the music again, with another, like a lot of South Asian crew behind this project as well. So Mayuresh Madgaonkar, who's a Mumbai-based musician, amazing musician, composer. He did the score. So all of that was original soundtrack, original score for the movie. And that was a discussion me and him had, where it's like he thought that we needed the music, but then once he saw it necessarily without it, then it's like, as a musician, I'm sure you understand too, like, oh, we need music, and it definitely can heighten. But sometimes I feel like I'll watch a movie and it'll be like, man, I don't know if we needed that much music for this
Also,
particular
it
scene.
also needs space. Like
Yeah,
space is what creates some of the emotion too, because
yeah,
have like an inhale, and then you have the music can kind of be the climax or the kind of like solution, the resolution to
yeah,
whatever the dilemma is. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
sometimes the space when you're kind of like showing the conflict is enough. So I actually like that it was abstract in that.
Also, I felt like there the kind of um jolt that she receives, that the daughter and the mother, both of them receive, they both handle it differently, right? So the daughter gets enraged, uh but it's one of those where I felt that, again, adding music would just make it worse. And I'm thinking, if I get enraged like that, I'm I'm having like a almost a silent rage within me. So that's what I felt her character needed. And then while the mother does have a silent kind of upset, she ends up going down late, like, she ends up going down memory lane later too. So that was like, you're right, we needed a breath, like in the tenseness. And I wanted people to sit with the emotion. I think sometimes music keeps us from sitting with that emotion, because music cues us. Music says you have to feel this way because I'm cueing you to feel this way. But it doesn't let you feel if you want, like, not always however you want to feel. So, you
Well, what's
know,
good is like you allowed us to stew. You know,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
like you allowed us to like it adds the brooding element to it,
Hmm.
by just like allowing the visual to stand alone, which is cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you show the conflict, And I also you said a silent rage. I'm like, Mayank, I've never seen you angry in the short time I've known you. I can't imagine you ever having silent rage, but apparently you know enough of it that it's in you to write about it because you
Well,
actually
yeah.
wrote
The
about
thing is, I have a very long fuse, but the thing is, some people forget that I do have a fuse. So it's like, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just I yeah, you got that.
it. Yeah. So let me ask you this: what is next, and where can people find this movie?
So right now, Butterscotch is doing its film festival circuit run. It's currently actually recently just got selected for the Poppy Jasper International Film Fest, which takes place up in Morgan Hill in California. Which I will be there if anybody's listening and is in that part of the state. Uh, so it's making its rounds. It's still, there's still a lot of festivals it needs to go to. So hopefully by like mid to later this year, we'll have it at a distributor or somewhere on a streaming platform or online somewhere. Fingers crossed. But yeah, hopefully you guys can see it somewhere at a fest. Hopefully in LA as well. There's a lot of fests that are still have yet to give us our decisions. But
That's
yeah, and
part of the process. It's like
yeah,
you make something really beautiful, and then you wait for someone else to interpret it for
hmm
whatever reasons, whether it gets into a major festival or a smaller festival. It's like, man, it's so. This is what I don't like about art. And I had a meeting with a very well-known executive producer for documentaries, and he said, the arts. There's no suffering in the art. The suffering comes when after the art is finished, and we figure out where people can find it and where like that's where
yeah.
it starts. And I was like, that is so true. It's like finishing the craft is one thing, or finishing the art is one thing, and then the other part of it is finding the audience, finding the market, finding a way to get it so people can see it. So, but you're doing a great job. You're winning some awards. You're getting some awesome film festivals, and it's got to be super exciting. And we look forward to seeing many more films from you, Mayank. I think you're a very talented film director and writer, and I hope you never stop making movies. And where can people find you if they want to find more about Butterscotch?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram. We are at butterscotch underscore the film, I believe. And you can find me on Instagram as well. It's at mayankmd.official.
Spell it out because people
Oh, sorry. Yes, it's at mayankmd.official. And we're on socials. I'm sure if you search my name, you'll find it. And yeah, you're asking about what's next. I am actually planning on going to India in like a month, and I'm planning on shooting another short there. So that's my
awesome.
next thing.
Very, very cool. Well, Mayank, when that's finished, you have an open invitation to come on board, and we'll do another interview with you because you're a great cat and you're a very talented dude. And we look forward to many more films from you, man. And keep making these
Thank you.
movies because Butterscotch was amazing, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. So thank you for being a guest on Wake Up Hollywood, and you'll have to keep coming back. Every movie, you got an open invitation to keep coming back, man. That's where
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm a big fan of yours, and I respect your work. So it's really great to have this experience and this talk and conversation.
I watched your film and I was like, man, this guy knows how to shoot a movie. We'll have to collaborate on something, man.
For sure. I look forward to it.
Movie and we have to hang soon too, man.
Absolutely.
Talk shop. Man. On behalf of Mayank, myself, and Sam, Happy New Year, everybody. Check out Butterscotch at a film festival near you and soon to be released. Cross your fingers, right? Cross your fingers.
Cross all the fingers. Yes.
Fingers and toes. All right. We'll see you guys here next week. Peace, love. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Good luck in life because it's a new year. Let's make shit happen. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
You're listening to Wake Up Hollywood with Nikki Korula and Eddie Pence, right here on LA Talk Radio.